And we are alive for real this time. Troy, is this like the first live thing you've been on this channel?
I think second. I think I was live maybe back in February of last trade deadline, and maybe one in April looking at the draft or something.
Okay, so this will be
May.
a lot. So there will be a lot
Yeah.
more people around this time than ones that
Yeah.
you've done in the past.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Well, thank you to everyone that's already coming in. Welcome to our NBA draft reaction special slash venting session slash dissecting session. I am one of your hosts, Sean Murphy, but joined by the Marquette Heat, the Alaskan assassin, except he's not Alaskan, my guy, Sergey. Troy, thanks for being here, my friend.
Absolutely, Sean. Great to be here. Wow, Christmas did us well. NBA trade deadline. Oh my goodness, it was incredible at like 2:20, 2:25. Like I had the Woj on Twitter on my laptop, and I'd hit refresh, and a new trade would come in. And 5 minutes later, I'd hit refresh, and new trade would come in. 5 minutes later, refresh, another trade went in.
Dude, I don't know about you.
There's been many good trade deadlines, but this one was nuts.
I feel like at 6 a.m. this morning, Eastern Standard Time, you could just hear a collective "What the?" from everyone waking up and realizing that Kevin Durant is now in the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah.
I think that, that's, I don't know about you, Troy, but that's one of the craziest things I've ever woken up to.
Yeah,
personally.
definitely. Same. And we were just talking before we hit live of the magnitude of this as far as a player with Kevin Durant's skill level, Kevin Durant's ability as far as being a top 5 player in the league, get traded the way he did. Wilt Chamberlain's been traded, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, like you mentioned, different eras, but man, Kevin Durant of that talent and that magnitude to get traded.
Yeah.
We never seen LeBron get traded, never seen Giannis get traded.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought up Kareem, because the second coming of Kareem was traded to the Detroit Pistons today, and James White. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be mean. I just, it was a good segue. But Troy, there was a trade that went down today. First of all, Chuck, thank you for being here, brother. And this is actually exactly where I want to lean our conversation into in a second. Troy, you're the man who shares your namesake, Troy Weaver, decided to trade Saddiq Bey and Kevin Knox to the Golden State Warriors, who then essentially flipped Saddiq to Atlanta in exchange for 5 second-round picks, and then flipped Kevin Knox to Portland in the deal where they ultimately got Gary Payton II back. But what we care about is that Saddiq Bey is now an Atlanta Hawk, and in return, James Wiseman is now a Detroit Piston. I know reports had said at one point that the Pistons would want a first-round pick or a quality young player in return for Saddiq or something along those lines. However, as Chuck pointed out in the article that James Edwards said, I don't want to get into everything with it because I don't want to steal that thunder, and since it is behind a paywall, like that just wouldn't be fair. But what I will say is that it does seem, and what was highlighted on Twitter was, it seems some in the organization had grown weary of some of Saddiq's shot choices and the way his game was developing. And it seems like Troy Weaver was really high on James Wiseman in the 2020 draft, and still really high on Wiseman. Troy, I want to know what your thoughts were at first when you saw that James Wiseman is the Detroit Piston.
Yeah, the first thing I thought was Troy Weaver's not done. He's going to flip Wiseman for something else. He's going to go for a wing. He's going to go for a shooting guard, bring more depth in the wing position.
Maybe even John Collins?
Yeah, maybe even John Collins. Maybe still go post, but someone who can, stretch the floor a little bit like John Collins was kind of my first thought. But then 230, 245, 255, nothing. 3 o'clock rolls around, no trades happen. I guess James Wiseman's here to stay. Of course I wasn't happy. I thought Saddiq Bey had a little more trade value than just Wiseman. I thought at first Wiseman and Durant, as far as on the court together, is kind of a blast from the past as far as the direction the NBA is going with
in certain ways.
Yeah.
I would say with Cleveland, I think
Sure.
they've shown that you can have big, like, two bigs, that can protect the paint, and if as long as, like, they're rim runners, they can get over the rim. And but the other thing, and what makes that work, is that Evan Mobley has at least some remnants of the ability to stretch beyond the paint. And so
Jared Allen's an all-star level talent.
Right. Exactly. And like Jalen Duren looks like he's a stud. And I believe James Wiseman tries to shoot threes. Am I remembering correctly?
Kind of, but not as much as than Mobley.
I know he's not exactly an assassin from beyond the arc. He does, by the way, for the record, he's attempted 0.1 threes per game this year. So he's a sniper from beyond the arc. All those guys from Golden State, it's in the water over there. My thing, we had to play Noel last night. I don't want to see him again this season. I would wager, unless there was some form of injury, that you will not see him again this season. In fact, Troy, I think that more than likely Noel's going to probably be bought out. And I think the reason why he wasn't traded, to answer your question, is because I think teams called to inquire on him. But I think the reality of it is, I don't even think teams necessarily wanted to part with a second-round pick. I mean, I don't know what Noel's value is right now, Troy.
Yeah, I would say a second-round pick might be a little too much. And yeah, you're probably not willing to give that up even. So there's, as much as we wanted Noel gone, there's really absolutely no market for him.
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, this is 100% why I don't use the green screen as much anymore, is because I love the natural background, and I almost feel like it's like, the poster's dope, the bobbleheads are all dope, and then you get to see my cat. And so there's that bonus. But anyway, yeah, so how is Noel even in the league, honestly? That's a better question. And that's probably the question other GMs are calling and asking the Pistons. We're like, that's a great question.
I don't think he will next year. I don't think he'll be on any of the 30 teams next year.
I'm sure he'll get like a spot, like, unless, like, I think it depends on what happens to him the rest of this season. I could see him being on the buyout market. And if he's available on the buyout market, I could see teams like the 76ers at least throwing out a flyer, because they don't like what they're getting from Montrezl Harrell. You know what I mean?
Sure, but next year means 60 more players in the league in the draft.
No, I'm agreeing with you on next. Like, I'm not saying next year he's going to be like this stud. What I'm saying is like, I don't think his career's dead. I think if anything, we'll see him get like one more shot towards the end of this year, and then they'll probably give us the answer. I mean, but ultimately, from this, like, my question though, and Troy, maybe this is where, like, you and I can kind of discuss. Doesn't it feel like James Wiseman has a very similar skill set to another player on this team? And doesn't it feel like there's another guy that we acquired a couple years ago who was also a number 2 pick, who also didn't live up to expectations, who's about 6'11", 7 feet tall, who's a big man, who's left-handed, who doesn't quite have the ability to handle the ball, who isn't quite stout on the defensive end? Is that ringing a bell at all to you, Troy?
Yeah, you're talking about Isaiah Stewart, right? We're talking about Marvin Bagley.
Yeah, Marvin
Absolutely,
Bagley.
We're talking about Marvin Bagley. And I think, I mean, that was really one of the first thoughts I had, is you're going to have another Marvin Bagley on the court with Durant. I mean, we saw a little bit of that this season. I want to be wing focused, man. I don't have a problem moving away from Sadiq.
And I think that's, and to your point, Troy, the other thing of that report, or like the other piece of this trade, and to your point about being wing focused, this does open up the opportunity for Isaiah Livers to perhaps fill, perhaps fill the responsibilities and the role that Sadiq wasn't quite, trying to pursue. Like a guy like Isaiah Livers, he's going to come in and shoot the three. He's going to defend like hell. That's what he does. He doesn't get distracted from his role and from playing team basketball, right? I think it makes sense, and it's clearly someone that like Troy Weaver's invested in, but I'm just interested to see because James Wiseman, he's been in and out of the rotation, he's been in and out of the G League and back up to the regular league. Like he's been kind of thrown all over the place, Troy. And so I'm interested to see like what does he do with consistent NBA minutes?
Right.
And if they do start him, do you think they start him alongside Jalen Durant? Because according to Mark Spears, who's he knows his stuff. If he's reporting this, probably valid. The Pistons reportedly plan to start James Wiseman.
Yeah.
And so with that, do you think they also start Jalen Durant as well? What do you think?
I think so. I mean, look how well Durant's been playing. I get you're the same position, and I get that will be a cluster. But here's the thing: I can't see you make Durant your sixth man off the bench. In my opinion, he's playing too well.
Oh yeah, no, you do not bench Jalen Durant.
No,
Hell
you
no.
don't. You don't.
Hell no. No. If anything, Wiseman would be the one that would be more likely to go to the bench.
Right. Right.
Yeah, Chuck, you got it down. This is exactly what it is. Sean Wiseman and Bagley. Maybe the plan is that we have one healthy at a time and they tag team. It's like in wrestling when they get tired and when they're like crawling to the corner and it's like tag, and it's like the other comes in.
That's as much as we laugh and as much as we honestly say that's true. In my opinion, that's just not the direction a franchise should really be going.
Well, and Troy, here's the other piece of it as well. It's like I think one thing that we did do, and I think we do every year with the trade deadline, is we feel some form of finality with it. Like this is the last opportunity that we have to make moves.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is, Troy, business opens back up in 3.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and in addition, is this the season that you want to like bulk up and add more to your arsenal? I mean, you only have 27 or 26 games left. If they were to bring in, like, let's say they traded for Cam Thomas or Mikal Bridges today, or both, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say they went crazy and did something big, or even let's say, because it sounds like reportedly the Pistons also spun the wheels on John Collins too. Let's say they got John Collins. Well, what if they go on a winning streak, and instead of having the worst record in the East, they have the third or fourth worst record? I'm not saying that would happen,
right?
But I mean, Troy, I'm not saying this team's looking to tank or that they're putting themselves in a position to lose on purpose. But what I am saying is they're definitely not trying to ruin their opportunity at a generational lottery. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And I mentioned it earlier, and I get your input, but with how the league is going with stats, sometimes I do think potentially if you give Wiseman the minutes, his value could be there in that 3.5 months to flip. Just saying.
Well, I mean, he could. He could be something that's like an intriguing like trading piece, and at the very least, he'd be an expiring contract, right? Sure. Like at the very least, he would be $12 million off of a team's books, So in that point, he would have some in that way, he would have some form of value as well. But I think it's one of those things where, and Chuck, this is actually an interesting question. Is Bay going down the same path that Drummond did? He didn't understand his own talent and tried to do things out of his skill set. Yeah, Chuck, I think to answer your question, I think a lot of guys, come into the league and, I like Sadiq's an insanely hard worker and he has a lot of, belief in what he can be and where he can go, and where his game can take him. I think the reality of it is that sometimes I think people don't realize that greatness can also just be fulfilling the role that you're asking to fulfill. And the role, and like sometimes like the role you're best at is what you should be striving to be the best at. So Maybe Sadiq at some point will have a realization that, like the creation stuff isn't working. And I think in Atlanta, I think he's going to have a way shorter leash on that stuff.
Mhm, mhm.
I think if he tries to dribble out the majority of the shot clock on like in the second unit and Atlanta's offense is stalling and they're starting to struggle and fall behind, Sadiq will be out of the rotation quickly.
Yeah.
If he's a catch and shoot 3-point specialist who plays really hard on the defensive end and contributes to winning and doesn't demand the ball, he'll be awesome. I
Yeah.
think that's the big thing. What do you think about that, Troy?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great take on Sadiq, and I think we all know he has talent, but how he uses that talent to impact the team he's on in this new case, Atlanta, he's gonna have to know his role quickly, because again, if he was trying to expand his game with the ball handling and get to the making points on his own as far as creating his own shots on Detroit's roster, good luck with Atlanta because they are very much in contention for a playoff seed, if not a play-in seed. And I just feel like they need him to be the catch and shoot kind of guy, and they also need him to play hard defense. But both things we know he's capable of doing, but will he do it is going to be the question.
Right. And again, the thing is for Detroit, like you have a guy like Isaiah Livers in house that you believe in as much as you do. And on the offensive end, they brought in Bojan and Burks for a reason. And
Sure.
speaking of, they did decide to hold on to Bojan and Alec Burks through the trade deadline. Again, that isn't shocking considering all the reporting and the things that we heard ahead of time. When they made the Wiseman move, did you think that they were going to flip it into moving Bogdanovich as well? Or what did you think was going to happen?
No, no, I didn't think Bojan was going to get traded. I guess I thought maybe a Burks would have been thrown in a package.
Yeah, like maybe he was the more gettable because he might
Right.
not have as high of the asking price.
Yeah, yeah, that's where my head went with it. Packaged with Wiseman. I
Right.
guess I really didn't think Wiseman would play a game with us. I really didn't
Right.
at first, but
Right. Well, he ain't just playing with us, Troy.
he's
He's
starting.
starting.
Yeah.
So we're going to be seeing a lot of James Wiseman down the stretch. I mean, not only is it going to be interesting to see just how James Wiseman holds up in an NBA rotation. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how he pairs with Durant, how he pairs with Beef Stew.
Mhm.
You know what his chemistry will be like with Marvin Bagley when he ultimately comes in the lineup. But also, like, if the Pistons do ultimately hang on to him through the summer, can playing with guys like Cade
Mhm.
and Ivy and maybe who knows, Victor. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
can those things maybe with Wiseman, it's kind of like a similar thing. And this is gonna be a really stupid comparison when I say it, but let me explain it for a second. Maybe it's similar to Jared Goff, where he's this guy who has insane upside and a lot of talent. But if you put the right pieces around him, you don't ask him to do too much, and you put him in a situation to succeed, maybe he can thrive off of that. But at the
And that's a
same time,
possibility. That's a possibility for really any NBA player, right?
right. But at the same time, we could just be on the other side of the Darko Milicic trade
Mhm.
years ago, where instead of trading away a Darko, we got one in house.
Yeah.
That's also a possibility.
Right. Right. Yeah, certainly, Sean. And it is going to be interesting too. And I know we've talked about Dwayne Casey and his future, but say we do have starting Wiseman is why you fire Casey this
First
summer.
of all, first of all, if you think that's Dwayne Casey's decision, what?
Yeah. No, where I was going at it with it,
No, I
Sean.
know. I'm just responding to
Right.
this
I
comment.
know that. I
That's
know
just
that.
asinine. But anyway, go ahead, Troy.
I was gonna say, can Wiseman develop potentially under a Dwayne Casey? You know what I mean? Like is Wiseman's story over? And I'm gonna say not quite.
No, I don't think so either. And I think if anything, I think from the year 2022, 2022 is the year of the comeback story.
Mhm.
We saw freaking Geno Smith was in the Pro Bowl, for God's sakes. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
Detroit Lions had one win, and all of a sudden we're playing for a playoff game. And by the way, made your Packers their bitch, Troy. But anyway, but anyway, it's in all seriousness. I understand the questioning of the move itself, but the overreaction of going, well, then we have to question the people that are in charge. It's like, okay, but hold on. I even heard I heard Mike Valeni say earlier today. I was listening to his take on the trade deadline. He's like, teams like Orlando, they have 12 picks. Oklahoma City has 19 picks. What do the Pistons have? And it's like, first of all, you do realize those teams started their rebuilds by trading away stars, right? And the Pistons started their rebuild by having nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somehow have as many, if not more, young pieces that have potential than they do. I mean, a lot of if you look at the Pistons, the young core that they have currently, just to name some of the players that are like in the system. I mean, it's there's Wiseman now, but then you have Jalen Durant, Isaiah Stewart. There's Isaiah Livers. I almost said Sadiq Bey. Isn't that funny? Marvin Bagley, Cade Cunningham, Killian Hayes, Jaden Ivey. There's still a lot of promise here. And then the cap space and flexibility they still have, because this only cost them $4 million in cap space. So, if you really start to peel it back, at first I was like, oh my gosh, we traded Bey for Wiseman. But as they peel it back further, I mean, Troy, you don't have anything to lose down this stretch of 20 some games.
No,
and if they believe in him, let's see what he has. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think some Pistons fans overreacting in a way. I mean, of course I wasn't, and still I'm not super thrilled. I got to see Wiseman talent to really believe it. But one thing I will say about Saddiq Bey is he's not as talented as we are making him out to be. At least a lot of Pistons.
I do think we have a habit of overvaluing our pieces 100%.
Yeah,
and maybe we were guilty of doing that a little bit as well. And granted, I know I wear Pistons stuff on my chest. I know inherently I am a fan of the team, but really I think the reason why the bias is there is because you're a fan more. So I know for me with Sadiq, I'm a fan of the person. When you read the stories of his work ethic and the things that he puts in, you want to believe that in his potential, and you want to believe that there could be something more there than other people think there could be. Right. You know what I'm saying? But I think at the same time, I think, I think it could be a similar thing of we overvalue what Sadiq was. And maybe because of NBA meme culture, maybe to a certain extent, we undervalue the fact that James Wiseman just a couple years ago, I mean, he was a highly touted player, national player in college. He was a top prospect in his draft class for a reason. I mean, the Golden State Warriors didn't draft him for nothing.
Correct. Yeah, the potential is always there.
And to be fair, they didn't just trade him right away. They put a lot of time and effort, to see if they could possibly make it work. And it just came down to the fact that this team wants to repeat, and this guy just couldn't get healthy and put it all together in time. And
the health you brought up too, Sean, that's going to play a big factor, I think, into, well, probably not this year, but next year.
Right. 100%. Well, yeah. And just going forward for the rest of his career, right? That the time will tell with that. And, if he isn't healthy and ultimately it just isn't what it is. Well, Troy Weaver apparently wasn't planning on paying Sadiq anyway. Right. And, if you let Wiseman walk, then ultimately, you have, the cap space, and you took your swing, you know what I mean? But, I don't think it's something that will set the franchise back. I think where my initial concern and where the sickness comes from is this inherent thing, Troy, that you and I have talked about quite a lot in the past, about how the Pistons have this array of players that they have traded away, and we didn't see what their full realization was of their game in Detroit. And then they went off to other places and showed what they could do.
Yeah. There's
specific
so many
examples. You already know where I'm going, right? Chris Middleton,
Spencer Dinwiddie,
mm-hmm.
Christian Wood in some ways.
And yeah, I think Chris,
some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. He was way freaking overrated the COVID season. I loved how everyone in like the 2021 years like, man, Christian Wood, he's an all-star. I'm like, is he?
Luke Kennard is playing the same basketball he did here, if not worse. So
well, I wouldn't say worse. I mean, he's gotten better. Like he's gotten better as a playmaker. He's a solid 3-point shooter. I mean,
we gave him a little more touches. Yeah. Therefore, his stats were a little bit better here.
Right. Yeah. He was another guy who couldn't find a consistent spot in the rotation, in the Clippers. I'm interested to see, what it will do for him being in Memphis now. I think that's an interesting fit for him. But Troy, as far as going into the summer, then I think this sets I think we already knew where our need was. We already knew like where this team needed to improve, but now it's just even more glaring. I mean, the wing depth, that's 100% the target. And with Sadiq no longer being here going forward, I suppose that opens up the freeway for adding even more wing depth on this team as well.
Yeah. And looking forward to that. If not in the draft, in the offseason for free agency is where we're going to get it. But also the developing guys like an Isaiah Livers, can't really see him being the starting 3 moving forward. But maybe
no, I don't think he'd be a starter. I don't think he'd be a starter, but he certainly
but a great piece to
no, he could be an awesome rotation player.
Yeah, right.
And again, like core pieces don't always have to be starters.
Correct.
Right. Correct. So, like someone already brought it up. Like this was like talked about. Jeremy Grant could reportedly be brought back in free agency. And Troy, I would be there for that.
All for that. That would be so much fun. And then, it gives back, if some Pistons fans were still upset about today's trade, gives back some more credibility to Troy Weaver. I mean, he flips Grant for essentially Durant. As far as the draft pick, and then if we get Jeremy Grant back, I mean that basically adds Durant for free. It's great. I would love Jeremy Grant. I mean, and seeing his role in Portland too.
First of all, hell no on the second one.
Yeah, I was going to say what?
Brandon Miller maybe, but Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson for that are on the Brooklyn Nets currently. I could see a world, Troy, where Troy Weaver is going to be giving them a call around draft day, and I'm not sure what it would take to get one of those wings off of their hands. It sounded like with Mikal Bridges, it would take as much as at least 3 first-round picks, which I don't know if you want to pay that price.
No,
for a guy like that. I don't think they're in that type of push their chips in the middle of the table situation.
But Bridges helps every team in this league.
Right. However, if you maybe give up 1 pick and then a rotation player for Cam Johnson, I would not be opposed to that route at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's proven himself too as a guy who can play valuable minutes and score as a role player in this league.
Right.
He did it all year last year and even most of this year for Phoenix. So
right. You don't think MB deserves another chance? I think more has to develop in the legal side of things. I think more things have to be settled in that light. However, I personally don't give people that do what he did. I'm not quick to give those people second chances, to answer your question. And I think Naranjan, which shout out Naranjan, I think he gives a great point here. I feel like a lot of the Weaver hate wouldn't be coming up if Cade wasn't hurt, which 100%. I think, and also Naranjan, I think the idea of Wiseman would be more appetizing if Cade was in the lineup. Because at the very least, you can picture what he could start to be doing with Cade Cunningham right away. Sure, I'm interested to see what his pairing's going to be like with Jaden Ivey and with Killian Hayes. I think more so Killian would be where I'd want to see that relationship develop if they're going to be the guys coming off the bench for us, if that's the plan, right? But I mean, I guess apparently if he's starting, who freaking knows? It's just if you would have told me yesterday that James Wiseman was going to be the guy we were going for, I just wouldn't have believed you, Troy. I just wouldn't have.
Yeah. But like you said, the fact that Troy Weaver had this guy number one on his big board in 2020 um, shows us that Troy always had his eye on him. So
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing as well, we've seen like over and over again, like Troy Weaver is willing to take bets and as soon as like and as soon as he makes his decision, like he's not afraid to like move on or move off of people. Like we saw like he brought in Dennis Smith Jr. like earlier,
yeah,
like a
right,
couple of years ago, like
right,
that project. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm a good, like scrap that, moved
yeah,
away. Like
right,
we've seen him do those things at times. I personally, again, I don't think there's any reason to sound the alarm bells. I do think that, like I do think that with keeping Burks and Bogdanovich, it signals the fact that they do want to turn the corner a little bit more next year. And so I think Wiseman will have that, the longer leash this year, like the rest of the guys. And I honestly think that's the best thing for him. But next year, that leash will not be as long.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. And I think moving forward too, like to view these games, we've described these last games in this stretch of the season as audition, right? Who's going to be a good Detroit Piston moving forward? Who's going to be a good NBA player moving forward? So if we as Pistons fans, well, ultimately Troy Weaver being the judge, views this last stretch of the season, especially now with a new guy like Wiseman, as an audition of, okay, what is your role going to be for the team next year? What is your role going to be with the team moving forward? That's a good attitude to have, I think. I really think that's a good attitude to look at moving forward with him as far as his potential on this team long term or short term. Because he's certainly a project, a Troy Weaver project. But like you said, Troy Weaver has no problem scratching those projects if need be.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things where, at the end of the day, ultimately, time will tell. He said that's gambling, baby. And the reality of it is, when you're doing a rebuild, there are certain aspects of a rebuild where you are counting on luck, where you are relying and you are going to the table and you are rolling the dice. And you know what? This is a roll of the dice, but at the same time, I think it's one of those things where as much as, as much as we appreciate everything Sadiq did and like as fun as some moments were, in his time in Detroit, like we knew at some point that key members were going to be moved and that there were going to be decisions made, and whether they're popular or not, like this is the same guy who signed Mason Plumlee and flipped it into Bojan Bogdanovic eventually.
Right, right,
So,
right.
you know, the full picture here is by no means painted. I think we will have much more to dissect and talk about in that regards come July. But Troy, for now, I do real quick want to touch on everything else that we saw in the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Other than the Kevin Durant move, what was your favorite trade that you saw?
Yeah, that's going to be kind of a tough one since there was so many big ones. But it happened actually yesterday. The Russell Westbrook going to Utah was pretty interesting. That's certainly going to be interesting with D'Angelo Russell back in LA. But that one, I guess, rings a bell. I guess the Warriors getting Gary Payton back was kind of interesting. I really did not see that coming, but we know how much of an important piece he was to that championship team last year. So to get him back, I'm sure if I'm a Warriors fan, I'm going to be thrilled. But I'll just say it. I put in our group chat earlier, Sean, the one that I'm most surprised about was not even a trade that happened at all, but the Toronto Raptors deciding to keep OG Anunoby. I mean, wow. I mean, we were talking about that was the highest probability in our list, and it didn't even get to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he was like just being floated out there as this piece that was,
Memphis and New
just so
Orleans.
coveted throughout the league. And apparently, I guess, with so many bidders, I think Toronto just, probably wanted to, really run up that price and see how far it could go. But also, I think you saw that Masai Ujiri is still, hesitant to move off of this core. And if they still believe in it, then like that's their prerogative. Go right on ahead, do whatever you want to do. But at the same time, I personally would not be, you know, be so complacent to hold on to this roster, because I think you could argue that this team is regressing. And especially with how much it sounds like OG Anunoby would not mind not being in a Raptors uniform,
Yeah.
I personally just disagree with the decision there as well. And you know, and them as and then not only not selling, but buying, going and getting Jakob Poeltl. I mean, I don't personally think Jakob Poeltl makes them drastically better. They did need a big, and Jakob Poeltl's a solid big at that. But yeah, I'm with you, Troy. That fascinated me. I will say, as much crap as we give this team, the Los Angeles Lakers were able to flip Russell Westbrook
Yeah.
and actually turn it into a pretty decently competitive roster.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think Lakers moving forward have a chance to certainly be a playoff team. Not playing team, playoff team.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe instead of getting bounced in the play-in tournament, maybe they'll get bounced in the first round. No,
Yeah.
but in all seriousness, like Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley, D'Angelo Russell makes them much more formidable than they were.
Right.
I do think that if they wound up getting Bojan and got that deal done, I think they would have been much more formidable. I could see them getting to the conference semis at that point. But at the end of the day, I still think the West is too stacked. I still can't bet and rely on the health of Anthony Davis or LeBron going down the stretch.
Mhm.
And even though this roster's better, I think the West as a whole just got even better. Like it was like, man, before Kevin Durant came into the picture, that Lakers team could have contended in my eyes.
Mhm.
And then Kevin Durant happened. And then things change.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly.
Mhm.
Who did they get in return for Thomas Bryant? I forgot.
They got a couple second round
Okay.
picks, I believe. It sounds like reportedly ever since Anthony Davis came back, Thomas Bryant wasn't thrilled with the role
Sure.
that he had gotten.
Right.
And they pretty much flipped. They essentially had flipped that like essentially flipped Thomas Bryant, ended up getting Mo Bamba. Yeah,
No
Mo
Bamba.
Bamba.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so I'm excited to see Bamba in a Lakers uniform. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
You know, and Anthony Davis finally will stop pretending that he'll play the 5. So there's that. Yeah, Wiseman starting. That's gonna be the fascinating thing, Naranjan. He, according to Mark Spears, he will be starting. And so I would imagine that means him and Jalen Duren will be in the
It has
starting
to be.
5.
It has to be. You're not benching Durant.
No, you're not. You're just not. Especially just because simply Duren's better.
Yeah.
And Duren's just like he has more upside.
Does that mean
So
you play Wiseman at the 4? Do you just wing it and throw both of
wing
them
it.
at the 5? Yeah.
I honestly, I say you start Wiseman at the 4.
Yeah.
I think Duren has more of that mentality to bang in the post, and also I think he's a better defensive player. So if you're gonna have him in as like the anchor, which is the primary role that he plays on the defensive end, then I think that he's more fit to do that at this current time than Wiseman is. I think you still need to stagger their minutes and allow Wiseman to have minutes at the 5 and Duren with minutes at the 5 with Stewart as well. But it's going to be fascinating, man. I mean, going down the stretch, we're going to see the Pistons like really start to experiment and see some different lineups than we were seeing before. So in that light, these games down the stretch have become much more fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And even though like this team is still in a place where they're trying to lose games or like I wouldn't say trying to lose games, but they're certainly not trying to contend. You know what I mean? They're still learning how to compete. I don't think, like today, like again, I don't know if there was any of the moves that people were hoping for, but at the same time, again, Troy, if we go back to looking at the reporting that we were given ahead of time, the rumors that were out there, this is overall pretty consistent with everything that we heard ahead of time.
Right.
That
Right.
Sadiq would be the most likely to be dealt, that Troy Weaver was content with keeping
Oh yeah.
Bogdanovich and really likes Burks. And also he really wanted to open up more minutes for Isaiah Livers.
Yeah.
And they did that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's just going to be an exciting way to see the season kind of end with being attentive to how Wiseman's playing. But also, I don't think, with putting Bay out of the lineup now, are you going to give his touches to Bojan more? Or are you going to, I mean,
Well, I think
naturally some are going to go to Wiseman, but
I
where do you
mean,
stand on that?
I think it's just like an even distribution. I don't think it's like oh, this person gets his minutes. Like
Sure.
I think it's more of like an even distribution thing. I think it
Sure.
obviously opens up more touches and opportunities for Isaiah Livers. I think, I think once Bagley's back in the lineup, obviously he's going to be, getting more touches. He's going to have a solid spot in the rotation. I think this opens up the opportunity for Detroit maybe down the stretch to see, because let's be honest, as as teams start, getting down the stretch, they start putting in their younger players. And with that, I think you might start seeing more of Detroit putting in their two-way players in like the last 10, 15 games. Like I think you might see like Buddy Boeheim. And I think you'll see I think you will see Isaiah Livers starting, down the stretch at a certain point. But again, like for now, I don't think there's like any like huge changes to the lineup, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Definitely does.
But let's real quick before we wrap up the stream, we got to talk about Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
I think we might have been the show that took the longest to get to the Kevin Durant conversation. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments. Is the Phoenix Suns, I'm going to create a poll right now, actually. Let me do that right now. Are the Phoenix Suns contenders? I just heard myself and that just totally threw me off. Are they the favorite to win the NBA championship? And first of all, in case some of you don't know, the new owner of the Phoenix Suns is Matt Ishbia, who is the CEO of United Wholesale Mortgage, born and raised in Michigan, was a walk-on at Michigan State when they won the national championship, and now is the newest owner of the Phoenix Suns. Literally had his introductory press conference yesterday, and 12 hours after his press conference saying he's not going to make any sweeping changes. His franchise trades for Kevin Durant.
It's called cojones, Sean.
Oh, those are cojones. Those are some Ishbia balls right there, man. I mean, Troy, they have to be the favorite, right?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting when you go down the stretch with a hungry Grizzlies team, experience. Well, I guess one player hungry and experienced with Joker to go against the team. But again, when you have a big three of Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker, I mean that screams championship contender to me. We play contenders or pretenders. I don't see that being a pretender when you have both on your team.
No.
So moving forward, and even you got a guy like Dayton, or I'm sorry, Ayton, DeAndre Ayton, yes, at the 5. That's going to be very interesting too for Phoenix, especially we saw how he, struggled in that Game 7, all the drama that went there against the Mavericks in the second round last year. Can they put it together? They came up short. We know that their finals contenders, as far as they made it to the finals without Durant before in 2021. They were the favorite going into that Milwaukee series, and of course lost to Giannis in 6 and the Bucks in 6. I just think Kevin Durant, you add Kevin Durant to this roster, your franchise changes, and they're now my favorite to at least make it to the finals. Going to be very interesting if they can beat a Boston team or a Milwaukee team. But yeah, I have them going to the finals, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, the Denver Nuggets are awesome. I think they certainly will have something to say about getting to the finals. I think the Warriors, getting Gary Payton's second back, I think they'll certainly be improved. I don't think they quite have the firepower this year, and we also just don't know if Sadiq will be able to ultimately be ready to go by that time. So that just makes me more weary in that sense. But I think
Clippers will be interesting, but I still don't think they can compete.
Yeah, I agree. Like at the end of the day, those guys just haven't played together enough. And like again, like if you have a guy like Kawhi where you just don't know on a consistent basis if he's going to be there like night to night ready to go, you just inherently have questions. You do. So I think, I think Phoenix should be the favorite to get to the finals. But I mean, again, I know someone brought it up. Chris Paul is not exactly, the best when it comes to playoff performances. However, if you're Chris Paul, you just have to pass to Kevin Durant and get the out of his way. Like when you get to the finals, you literally are just the floor general. You tell people to get to their spots and you just let Devin Booker and Kevin Durant do whatever they need to do. You just let them do it and you just enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it, right? Like that's just as simple as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, at the same time, we talk about on the podcast, we talk about new owner syndrome. And Troy, Matt Ishbia has all the traits and all of the symptoms of new owner syndrome. However, I would argue if there's any player that you take that shot for, Troy, it's Kevin Durant.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not Rudy Gobert.
No.
As good of a player as he is, it's not Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
It's not even Paul George, Troy.
Yeah.
It's Kevin Durant.
Well, now you make a statement to the league saying, like, you're ready to compete now. Like, I think we're ready to compete now. We are competing now.
Not only are we competing now, we're starting to put measurements for where the trophy is going to go in our trophy case. Like we're talking to someone right now about getting our banners prepared. Like that's the statement Phoenix is making.
And good for Brooklyn. I mean, good for Kevin Durant. Bad for Brooklyn, but he understood. He understood that Brooklyn wasn't the place that he could win a championship this year, and even moving forward with all the drama with Kyrie and everything else, and the Steve Nash firing earlier in the season too. Like he just, in my opinion, he didn't have business playing there anymore. If I'm his camp and if I'm Kevin Durant himself, I don't want to suit up for that franchise. So Kevin Durant made it clear he did not want to be in Brooklyn. Which is interesting because you kind of make that Kyrie trade to put pieces around Durant, but then you trade him 72 hours later. But it's going to be very interesting, Sean. And
and now their team now the Nets are just all of the wings, and now apparently Ben Simmons has his own team just like he wanted. In all seriousness, just give the ball to Cam Thomas. Let him cook the rest of the season. See what you have there. Let him develop like that. That's your rebuild if you're Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But Troy, there are a lot of things I'm excited about coming out of this trade deadline. I know with the Pistons, that at the very least this gives us a new player to learn and to see his development. It gives us more things to discuss and to dissect going into the rest of the season. But Troy, thanks so much for being here and taking the time to be here, man. Absolutely, I really appreciate you.
Good
and
stuff.
Also, I did want to say before we end the stream, if you are a fan and you do enjoy this channel and you like what we do here, really quickly, be sure and go over to subscribe to my second channel. If you don't know, I actually started a new show this week called Mornings with the Murph. It's Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m. And I talk all things in the world of sports, football, basketball, everything. So I've been doing that. I've been really excited about it, really proud of how the first episodes have come out. So if you would like to see more of my face for whatever reason, you can head over to that channel and subscribe over there as well. And we also at From Half Court have a From Half Court Discord as well, where you can come in and be part of the community. If you want to talk more about this trade, about everything that's happening in the world of basketball, the massive things that have been happening over the course of the last couple of weeks, but also you want to chat with myself and just other members of the community, the From Half Court Discord is a really fun place to be. So here it is right here. Has a lot of different stuff in here. There's a link right down in the description below to join. It is 100% free. All it is just a place to get your announcements, but also to chat with other members of the community. We would love to have you. It is right down in the description below. Really would appreciate it if you guys joined. But with that, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in, being subscribers of this channel, supporting us, and you know, and being listeners and loyal to the pod throughout the season. We really appreciate it. Be sure you go follow my guy Troy on Twitter at TroySergey44, myself at Sean Halfcourt as well. There will still be lots of content to come about the deadline, and also we're going to be starting to do a whole lot of draft coverage and content really soon. So be sure you're plugged into that as well. But with that, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe. And now I have to click end broadcast.